Good afternoon. I will call to order the October 15th meeting of the Minneapolis City Planning Commission. My name is Matt Brown. I serve as president of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Ellison, Magrino, Sweezy, Coleman, and Cogill. At this time, I'll ask that you silence any mobile devices and we can get started with our meeting. So our first item of business is to approve the actions from the October 1st meeting. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve those actions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? That motion carries. Next, we will organize the agenda. You can find hard copies of the agenda in the hallway. We'll determine which items we will discuss and which will be considered on consent. Starting at the top, item 1 is 277 12th Avenue North. That is a vacation of an easement. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 1? Seeing no one, we'll put item 1 on consent. Item 2 is Augustana at 1007 East 14th Street, 1501 10th Avenue South, 1607, 1609, 1617 10th Avenue South, 1020 East 17th Street, and 1510 11th Avenue South, a variance and a preliminary and final registered land survey. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 2? Seeing no one, will put item 2 on consent. Item 3 is the Emily program at 3012 West 44th Street, a conditional use permit for a supportive housing facility. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 3? So no one, will put item 3 on consent. Item 4 is at 626 West Broadway. That's a conditional use permit for a shopping center. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 4? See no one, will put that on consent. Item 5 is at 2027, 2029, 2033 West Broadway, 2301 Oliver Avenue North, 2104 and 2106 23rd Avenue North, and 2101 West Broadway. Several applications for an addition to a building at that location. We'll discuss item 5 if anyone is here for that. Item 6 is Turbo Tim's Anything Automotive at 2823 and 2827 Central Avenue Northeast. Conditional use permit and a site plan review for an auto repair facility. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 6? Seeing no one, will put that on consent. Item 7 is the park printing expansion at 2801 and 2801 and a half California Street Northeast. A few applications for an industrial building addition. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 7? Seeing no one, will put that on consent. Item 8 is the Carbonda parking lot at 501 and 511 11th Avenue South. That is a conditional use permit and a variance related to a surface parking lot. We'll discuss item 8 if anyone is here for that. Item 9 is the H. Alden Smith House and Apartments at 1400 Yale Place, 45 Spruce Place, and 1403 Harmon Place. Several applications for a residential building. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation on item 9? So we do have some people here for that. We'll discuss item 9. Moving along, item 10 is the 14th Avenue Apartments at 854, 902, and 904 14th Avenue Northeast. Several applications for a new mixed-use project there. Is anyone wishing to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation for that item? I'll note that we received an addendum related to an additional alternative compliance request, but we'll put that on consent. Finally, item 11 is 11 at 1101 West River Parkway. Several applications for a new residential building at that location. I know Commissioner Rockwell had a question about that. Is anyone else wishing to speak on item 11? Okay, we do have someone here. So we'll discuss item 11 as well. So our agenda as amended is as follows. Items 5, 8, 9, and 10 we will discuss. Items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10 will be considered on consent. Commissioners may have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our Committee of the Whole consent agenda. And on October 4th, We considered some land sales at 2313 13th Avenue South, also 812 36th Avenue North, and 2212 36th Avenue North. We found that those items were consistent with the comprehensive plan. May I have a motion to find those items consistent with the comprehensive plan?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our public hearings. And first, I'll open the public hearing for the items on the consent agenda. Again, that's items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10. Is anyone wishing to speak on any of those items? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and commissioners may have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Next, we will move on to our items for discussion. Our first item for discussion is item 5 on West Broadway. Staff is Mr. Hanauer.
Hello, Chair and Commissioners. For the Capri Theater project, approximately 19,000 square foot addition that would be added on to the existing portion of the theater. Have some updated renderings for you provided by the applicant today. That first one being from West Broadway and this one being from 23rd Avenue. My plan was only to discuss the vacation application, as that was the only point of contention that we are aware of. The subject property and the alley vacation map. The property outlined in yellow is a property owned by Wellington Companies, a neighboring property owner. The Wellington wrote a letter objecting to the vacation request, stating that if that vacation was approved, it would eliminate vehicle access to their site, garage, trash, etc. Public Works and CPED do support the vacation request, even with the letter of objection. Staff does not find that this is part of a public transportation corridor, and we do not see the retention of the alley providing a public purpose. But on the counterpoint to that, staff does see that allowing for the vacation, there is public interest in allowing this development to take place, that being the Capri Theater project. The utility companies wrote a few of them responded to the notice of the vacation request, and there's some request for retention of easements, and that would be part of this alley vacation. And one of the points staff wants to point out is that we do see the retention, that Wellington would retain vehicle access rights via 23rd Avenue if a project in and of itself took place. 23rd is a two-way street, and there with Public Works and CPED have a track record of allowing vehicle access to a site when that is the only option. So I'm happy to answer questions you might have on this, or be ready for questions if you have them.
Commissioners, are there any questions of staff? And I'll just clarify, Aaron, since that site is zoned R4, it seems like it's likely that maybe down the road it could be assembled with some of the adjacent properties. It does appear, though, that a single-family home would be a permitted use in R4. So you're saying basically if the owner chose to build a single-family home there, they could simply have a driveway off of the street and have trash service.
That's correct.
Accessed off the street.
That's correct.
Okay.
And there's correct. So I believe representatives from Wellington are here to talk about this, and I can end things there for my part.
All right, sounds good. So I will open the public hearing for this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first and see if you have anything to add to the staff presentation, and also please state your name and address for the record.
Nguyen Hong, Baker Associates. I guess I'm just here to see if you guys have any questions that I can entertain. I also have materials if you want to see them. Otherwise, have at it, I guess.
All right, we can see if there are any questions of you, and it doesn't look like it. So we can move on to some other speakers. So is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? And please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Ann Long, Executive Director of PCYC in the Capri Theater. We're delighted to be here talking to you all again and moving along with our plans for this to become a community cultural hub, education hub, and we understand the objections that have been presented and believe that that there are certainly some ways that it can be mitigated that would not impact the vacating of the alley, which makes a difference to us in terms of being able to have the proper access to the theater and all of the parts that are involved with having that as a community hub. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And we can move on to some other speakers. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes, and please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Joe Hausman. I'm with Wellington Management. I'm here to represent the owner of the 2110 23rd Avenue. And we just wanted to say we're pleased that the project is moving forward. We're happy for the Capri and hope this project turns out well. So we have been working with CPED to arrange for an easement for the adjoining property so that we still have access to city services with the alley. I have a copy of a letter here that we would hope to continue to work with them to remove our objection to this vacation if we can come to an agreement on that easement. So I have this letter here that I will submit to the committee.
Okay, and you can leave that with the clerk if you'd like. Any further questions of the speaker? Seeing none, we can see if anyone else would like to speak on this item. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 5? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have several applications before us. Let's see here, a total of 8. Any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Rockwell.
All right, I would move approval of items A, B, and C that are rezonings.
All right, we have a motion to approve items A, B, and C. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve items A, B, and C. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. Moving along, Commissioner Rockwell.
Yep, I will move, I will turn my mic on first. I will move approval of items D and E and F, the variances with associated conditions, staff recommendations.
All right, we have a motion to approve items D, E, and F. Is there a second? Second. Right, any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries, and Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move item G, site plan review with staff recommendations, the 8 stated staff recommendations.
And we have a motion to approve item G, the site plan review with the 8 stated conditions. Is there a second? Second. A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. Finally, item H, Commissioner Rockwell.
I will move approval of item H, the vacation.
And we have a motion to approve item H, the vacation. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Rockwell.
Just very briefly, thank you for just reaching out to the other party and figuring out a solution. It's good when that
All right.
happens.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item H. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 5. Our next item for discussion is item 8 at 501 and 511 11th Avenue South. Staff is Ms. Dvorak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, Commissioners. We're working. This is an application for 501 and 511 11th Avenue South. That's known as the Carbonda parking lot. The applicant is proposing to convert the area that's shaded in gray on your map into a accessory parking lot. This area, actually I'm going to go back to this map. This 501 parcel had been former right-of-way. It served as the off-ramp and turn lanes when 94 exited into downtown onto 5th Street, and then when that was moved to 7th Street as part of a larger freeway reconstruction project, the intersection was reconfigured, and then back in 2017, the applicant, Timeshare Properties, petitioned to vacate that property, and it was approved by the City Council, and then a land sale occurred as the city was fee title holder of the underlying land. And so in 2017, a sale of that property transferred between the City of Minneapolis and then Timeshare Properties. Currently, Timeshare Properties on this property has 146 commercial parking lot. They hold a Class A license for that, which means they can lease it to anyone at any time, game days, event times, whatnot. They also have a 550 space parking garage at the other end of their lot on the east side of their property, on the other side of the office building that sits in between the parking garage and then the surface parking lot. The site is in the downtown parking overlay district where you cannot expand commercial parking lots, and so there needs to be a distinction made between the Class A parking lot license, the commercial parking lot, and then an accessory parking lot that would only serve tenants within the building. And the applicant is proposing to do that with the parking lot that they currently have on the site. They're proposing to reconfigure it. The area that is shaded in gray is currently green space, former street right-of-way, if you will. They're proposing then to reconfigure it, put a barrier between the two parking lots, and then convert this land to an accessory parking lot. And then the downtown parking overlay limits the number of spaces in those lots to 20, and the applicant would like to increase that to 30 parking spaces. And then there is a landscape plan in your site, and so you can see that they are proposing to landscape the perimeter of the parking lot, both the new parking lot, which would sit up at this end, I apologize, and then this is the remainder of that parking lot on the site. There is a letter from the Downtown Minneapolis Neighborhood Association supporting the applications. They did meet, I believe it was last week, that was noted in the letter from them that came in today. We are recommending denial of both of these applications. As I had indicated, they have 146 space surface parking lot and a 550 space parking garage on the property for a total of 696, give or take a few spaces, on the property. That can be leased to anybody at any time for any reason. We don't feel that there's any reason to support a conditional use permit or a variance to add an additional 30 spaces on the site. It does not meet the intent of the downtown parking overlay, which is to stop the expansion of surface parking lots and convert parking lots that exist to development. So we are recommending denial of both of those applications, and I will stand for any questions.
Okay, and Commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Rockwell.
Sorry, maybe I missed this as I was signing stuff. The applicant touched on, well, they indicated that the site was undevelopable. Do the staff, Public Works, and anybody else on the city side have an opinion on that? It sounded like there were a lot of utilities right there or something.
The building on the site is a data center. A lot of utilities do come into this building, and so yes, you could not put a physical structure over that corner of the property.
And do we know if you could over other corners of the property? And associated, do you have any idea if you can plant like substantial trees with those kinds of utilities there or no? Or I'm just trying to figure out, I mean,
Yep, they are proposing to plant trees. There are large shrubs on the site now. Lilac may be something. It's a large shrub. They are proposing. I guess I didn't actually look into the root
I didn't ask, yeah.
of the species of trees that they were proposing. As far as could they build on the rest of the parking lot, I'm not sure. I would ask their civil engineer to discuss that, where the utility lines are coming in.
Okay, because the rationale for denying, I mean, certainly we don't want to promote service parking lots, but in terms of alternate uses of the site, there's really probably not much. Is that accurate?
Correct. Green space to serve as a buffer from the Samotar crossing that comes over the freeway now.
Cool, thanks.
All right, any further questions of staff? Hearing none, I'll open the public hearing on this item, and we will have the applicant speak first, if someone is here to speak on behalf of the applicant. And please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Robert Dew, representing Timeshare Systems. To the commissioner's point on whether that site can be developed, the answer is no. That corner of the site cannot. On the issue of landscaping and what can be done down there, I think that's a key point that's supported by the neighborhood group, and I think they're here to speak to that. What's been proposed is really an intense beautification of that site, which it was cited in the staff report that there is currently a landscape buffer, I would say a weak one at best. And the proposed landscaping there would certainly clean up that gateway from the new entry from Cedar Riverside into the downtown district. On the planting front, we can verify that. The existing easement that was signed when City Council approved the vacation of that property in 2017. It is primarily data and power lines, and those are in excess of, certainly in excess of 36 inches, so it can still take some substantial landscaping. I'm sure we'll have to sort that out. But again, I guess the key point here, and I'd like to certainly hand it over and let the neighborhood folks speak about their desire to clean that area up. Right now, it effectively, on event days, leading up to event days, it effectively is being used as a parking lot. There's no drainage on that corner. We're proposing as part of this process to incorporate drainage, fence, landscape the site, and beautify it. So we certainly look for the commission to support this to the council.
And commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Cogill.
When you say it's effectively being used as a parking lot now, you mean people are just parking on the grass on game days?
Parking on the grass, parking on the road, parking on the sidewalk, parking on the bike trail. That whole block is effectively being used as, and I think we have somebody's got some photos that will be shown here shortly. Oh, here you go.
Varun Kavanda, one of the property owners, working with Robert Dew here. And so yes, the area is uncontrolled right now. This is the brand new Scimitar crossing that they just built, and that is the bike path, and there are vehicles parked right on the pathway. And this was the last game. So the whole area needs better control, and we have actually been advocating for Scimitar crossing, wanted a better connection to Cedar Riverside. We're all up for, you should have seen it how it was before. It was even worse. So it's gotten much better, and we are promoting to improve it. To answer Commissioner Rockwell's question also, you can't necessarily plant directly on those conduits, but we could closer to them. So I can show you a photo of where they are located. You won't want to put them directly on top of it, because if the tree were to, or if something or structure were to fall over, it could pull them out of the ground. So we won't want them necessarily on top of it, but further away from it would be ideal. But in our plan that we have, they're not planted on top of it. And I can show you more photos. This goes on. This is actually an older photo. Even wintertime, it really doesn't matter. These are all event games. This is motocross. you'll see the same thing for NCAA, which is going to come up. Welcome to come down here anytime during any Super Bowl, any game, and this is kind of the stuff that's happening.
Commissioner Sweezy.
My question is, why the need to go from 20 to 30? Other than that, I mean, I get the one reason, obviously, you can park more cars there, but if you were to stick with 20 and not need the variance for the extra 10, wouldn't that free up more space then to do something perhaps nicer as a compromise?
Well, aside from what the staff report cites, the commercial parking lot and the commercial parking ramp, there has been a significant number of increases of tenants in the building, and they certainly do on event days, and event days sometimes carry over multiple days, not just a single day. There have been cases where tenants have not had readily accessible parking, looking for street parking, what have you. So this is dedicated parking for those tenants, particularly on those days. And as far as going from 25 to 30, once it's laid out, it doesn't make reasonable economic sense to not.
So then on a game day, that wouldn't be public parking, for example? Those spots would be dedicated during a Vikings game too?
That's not the intent.
Pardon?
That's not the intent.
Okay. That's not the intent, but
I'll let the owner speak.
Yes, no, this would be for our own tenants, and the idea is that so it's a 24/7 facility. We want to be able to, people do come around the clock, and so this would be just dedicated for them. And then we are a good partner with the MSFA, so we do we want to continue to support much of what happens, even though the cars are parking, the general public parks in the larger ramp. On the west side, we handle most of the stuff, the back office kind of things. So a lot of the trailers, communications, security, these are the kind of things. So when they're going to set up for like motocross, they'll actually be there for probably a week before they actually are gearing up for the event. So for Super Bowl, 2 weeks or months. It just took a long time to get that stuff geared up, ready to go. NCAA was the exact same way. So we want to be able to offer the larger parcel for their facilities. We just had an event actually, and they had nowhere to park where the buses for the basketball game. And they had some difficulty maneuvering around. I'm sure they were coming to talk to your staff as to how to park, 100 buses that are coming for high school basketball, I think it was.
thank you.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Magrino.
I was going to say, for one thing, if people are parking there right now in the grass, that is probably want to not let people do that because you can get fined for that.
And it's not us.
But as a property owner, you are in charge of that property. So, but anyway, I was going to get into.
Just to clarify, the parking that has been occurring there was before we owned that land.
Okay.
And so we didn't have any control over it. And that's where the photo's coming from. Once we purchased the land, we actually could not stop people. We had to put a fence up.
Okay.
So we put the fence up, and then that got people to stop parking there. Because right now, there's just no control.
What I was going to ask is, could you detail a little bit the extent of these utilities that are preventing you from potentially redeveloping a lot in the future?
Yeah, so it used to be the left-hand turn. So if you're on 5th Street, you take a left onto 11th. It was the right-of-way. That's how the sidewalk went. So underneath that is where they buried the utilities. We'll just throw.
So that's like water and sewer in addition to all the fiber and telecommunications.
I think actually water. I have to check on water, but I think water actually heads straight west on 11th because it feeds the stadium. But fiber took a left on that curve.
So I think, according to the report from 17, Public Works indicated that they had nothing in the area to be vacated. CenturyLink, Quest,
Sprint,
and one other utility as part of the vacation required an easement to be held, and it was in the easement. It was simply identified as 30 substantial conduits at various depths, various sizes and depths.
From my knowledge, it's all telecommunications, not city facilities.
Okay. And I guess I'm just having trouble imagining what, an unmovable utility would look like. I can understand a sewer main that's, 5 feet across or something.
There was a study at one point, I believe, in discussion when the stadium was constructed of attempting to move some of those components further to the east, and that was quickly abandoned, largely due to the underground utilities in that area.
Right. They can be moved. It's a question of cost.
Sure, anything can be moved.
Yeah.
So, they obviously they feel that for us to move, let's say if we approach Sprint and move it, they would happily charge us a large fee.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, and it just, so that small of an area when you have to deal with paying out somebody just doesn't pencil out.
But so that is something you could in the future, if the value of the land was high enough,
Yes.
it made sense to redevelop it, you would be able to
Right.
get Sprint or whoever to let you move those around.
Right.
Yeah.
This small corner, the small corner that we're talking about, that problem doesn't exist, not to the extent that it does on the north side as it does on the south side. So to your point, if economic value drove a larger development, it would almost assuredly occur down here as opposed to up on the north side.
So it could happen as a supporting feature to the large lot, but not as itself. So if someone said, I wanted to build just in that little corner, you couldn't feasibly get high enough within that corner and move everything out.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any further questions? I'll ask one. What is your plan? What is the material you propose for that barrier? Are you thinking that's like a curb or a Jersey barrier?
It was listed as a 6-inch curb.
Okay.
In the civil plan.
That was actually a request from the city. So.
Okay.
To comply with the separation.
All right. Any further questions? If there are no further questions, we can see if anyone else would like to speak on this item. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, and please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tom Schmid. I'm with the DM&A Land Use Committee. And as you've heard, we have filed a letter of support for these applications. And I want to assure you we haven't done so because we like parking lots. We fully support the city's policy on this as a general principle. We believe in this case there are specific circumstances associated with this site that warrants a deeper look to the applications here. The triangle of land that has been described is in fact visually quite unattractive right now. It's mainly just grass, and it's used for the purposes you've heard described. And our belief is that it will continue to stay in that condition indefinitely if these applications are simply denied. At the same time, we believe that the site presents an important greening opportunity for this spot, especially because it lies adjacent to the downtown terminus of the Samotar Crossing. With your permission, I would like to read just the one paragraph of our letter that addresses this directly. After some questions and discussion, the DM&A Land Use Committee recommended providing a letter of support for the conditional use permit and the variance applications. It did so with the understanding that Timeshare Systems would update its landscaping plan to reflect the current plan and would be willing to plant canopy trees along the perimeter of both the existing and new parking areas. This would greatly enhance the visual field presented to pedestrians and cyclists using the recently opened Samotar Crossing, which connects Cedar Riverside neighborhood to downtown Minneapolis. The downtown end of the crossing terminates at 11th Avenue South, with the back of U.S. Bank Stadium straight ahead and the blank wall of the Elliott Park substation to the north. A lush tree canopy and landscape area to the south would soften the visual field and provide a more welcoming approach to downtown. The committee thus believes that this project presents an important greening opportunity as promoted in policies 13 and 14 of the Minneapolis 2040 comprehensive plan revised version. We, of course, would prefer to see this strip of land to be fully landscaped, to be completely given over to green space. But our position is that we believe that accepting these applications with whatever conditions we deem appropriate can in fact move us towards making this a more and greatly needed green space at this site. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, and please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
My name's Randy Manthe. I live at 100 3rd Avenue South in Minneapolis. I'm going to continue where Tom left off and really get into the specifics of the site. There's been a lot of specific questions about that. Does this work?
Yeah.
And we're here really representing the public realm of the neighborhood. Public realm is not a snapshot in time. A public realm continues round the clock, 7 days a week, all year long. Where this area is mostly impacted is on major event days. Now, what we've seen out here on major event days is that this corner has become a parking lot. What is happening, there are people affiliated with the city of Minneapolis who are closing the street. They are parking in the no parking area. They are parking on the grass next to Samatar Crossing. The vehicles are hanging over the new Samatar Crossing pathway. There are vehicles driving up and down the pathway to get in and out of this area. It's basically become a lot used by city employees, city staff who are working the game. So going back to this particular picture, what they've done this week compared to the last Viking games is the stadium has taken the initiative to put up a barrier to keep cars from parking on this corner. If this area isn't permanently controlled and managed in a way that it supports the active uses around this building, the major events as well as the day-to-day use of Samatar Crossing and this particular street as a major bikeway connection, this is just going to turn into a vacant lot. The applicant really has no incentive to improve this lot other than leave it the way it is right now. It's just grass. There is no landscaping of any consequence other than grass. So what we would prefer to see is that the applicant be allowed to develop this parking lot. Size can be determined, number of spaces determined. And then in that development of that parking lot, he's going to create an edge that is going to be very attractive in the context of the public realm. He's going to put in a landscaped edge. He's going to put in a decorative fence around this parking lot. He's going to put in trees, canopy trees along the edge of the street. So now we have an urban edge. We've created an urban space. This is an actively used new corridor, Samatar Crossing. This is the new gateway into the Samatar Crossing. We need to clean it up. We need to make it look nice. This is also one of the front doors to the stadium. When you come down the big steps, this is what you see looking out at the surrounding neighborhood. So if we could get a parking lot as a means to getting enhanced landscaping, a decorative fence, and a public realm that is supportive at all times, the neighborhood would greatly appreciate that. So my ask is that you do not deny the variance, you do not deny the conditional use permit. You can condition this application on the enhancement of the landscaping, the decorative fence, and other features that would truly create an acceptable public realm edge to the streets adjacent to this new development.
Great, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we just have the two applications, the conditional use permit for accessory surface parking lot and a variance for the number of parking spaces. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with the motion? Commissioner Cogill.
I have one more question for the applicant. Is it accurate to say that there's really no incentive for you, given the current green space, to improve that green space so that people aren't parking on that land?
So
Maybe can we repeat the question?
Is it accurate to say that there's no incentive for you as the owner to improve the green space that's there so that people don't park on that land since they're parking there, I guess, illegally?
Other than being a good neighbor, I guess?
Yeah.
Probably not to the extent that's proposed in the improvement.
Okay. And would it be accurate to say that maybe being a good neighbor would be an incentive enough to improve that green space?
Well, certainly, I think that the intent is certainly to be a good neighbor, and we think that this is a mutually beneficial way to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Cogill.
I am going to move to deny the conditional use permit.
All right, we have a motion to deny item A, the conditional use permit. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Cogill.
I'll just say it doesn't seem clear to me, given the guidance that's provided by Downtown Neighborhood District, the Downtown Parking Overlay District, which would suggest that we shouldn't accept this conditional use permit, why the conditions are such that there should be an exception granted. I mean, if the applicant doesn't want people to be parking on this land, they can certainly make the improvements that are being proposed here without increasing the amount of impervious surface. It doesn't seem clear to me that the idea of being a good neighbor wouldn't be enough to make that acceptable.
Right. Any further discussion? I'll just add, I kind of have some concerns too, more related to the variance, and the conditional use permit, of course, is tied to the same site plan. I guess what I'm hung up on is the fact that they could, do a 20-space accessory parking lot with just a conditional use permit, and it wouldn't require that variance. So, and I realize there are some issues related to kind of being maxed out on the size of the existing commercial parking lot, but I do think the fact that it would be possible to do a 20-space lot, makes it difficult for me to support a larger lot. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
That motion carries. Item B, the variance, Commissioner Cogill.
Yeah, I'll move to deny the variance in the downtown parking overlay district.
We have a motion to deny item B, the variance for the number of parking spaces. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I think we kind of captured our reasoning in the previous motion, so if there is no discussion, clerk, please call a roll.
Coleman.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Kranzer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
7-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 8. Our next item for discussion is item 9, H. Alden Smith House. Staff is Ms. Dvorak.
Item 9 on your agenda is the H. Alden Smith House. We did review this at a joint meeting with the HPC, as the H. Alden Smith House is a landmark in the city. The project has been reviewed by the Heritage Preservation Commission, which included the rehabilitation plan for the existing landmark, and then the new construction that is occurring on the site that includes that 3-story link that connects to the historic landmark. The HPC approved the certificate of appropriateness on May 1st of this year. The project has not changed since you saw it last, although it did come down 1 story. So I guess it's now a 6-story building proposed instead of 7. There are several applications that are required. One is the conditional use permit to increase the height of the building. The site's also located in the Shoreland Overlay District, which restricts height to 2.5 stories or 35 feet. They're proposing a 6-story building or 73 feet. We are recommending approval of this. We're recommending approval of the site. There are 3 to 5-story buildings located across the street. The townhomes that are across the street are 3-story townhomes. There is a 22-story building here. The height of the buildings in the surrounding area then vary between 2 to 22 stories. We are recommending approval of that conditional use permit to increase the height. The next application, then, they do need a variance to reduce the number of guest parking spaces on the site from 2 down to 0. They are providing more parking in the building for residents. However, they don't have any mechanism to bifurcate the parking within the garage, so they are proposing to not have guest parking. However, as part of the project, they are working to add a green boulevard along Spruce Place. As part of that, they will be adding 4 new on-street parking spaces. No, they are not specific to this development, but it is for additional metered parking spaces that are at large, if you will, in the neighborhood for anyone's usage. But looking at that as a unique circumstance, they are increasing the boulevard width to add the green space, but also to try to help control some of the issues. The bike path comes up out of Loring Park and through the MCTC campus, which is just here north, if you will say north, or towards Hennepin of the site. There have been some issues at the neighborhood, and we've talked about this with Public Works, and so as some issues that came out of the neighborhood, and then to try to fix some of the bike problems on the sidewalks and whatnot, they are proposing this buffer, which adds those spaces. They do have yard variances then. One is along Spruce Place from 15 feet. It says to 0, only the porch is down to 0. The building itself, I'm gonna have to look at my notes. The building itself is between 6 and 11 feet, and then there is a stack of balconies in this porch for the ground floor unit that's at 0 feet. They also have a variance along Spruce, again listed as 15 to 0, but that will be down, the building itself will be between 7 and 9 feet, and then there are open porches and a staircase that's wider than what we allow per zoning that goes to 0, and the porches and the balconies go to 4 feet. So the building is not going to be up to the front property lines or the corner side property line in either case. And because this is on a block to itself, while the house is here and then there is MCTC campus buildings further north, we are recommending approval of those. It is a unique situation where they are rehabbing a historic landmark and bringing it out of its current state into a place where people will be able to live. And so we are recommending approval of those variances. They also do have a variance on the west interior side yard between 0. The building will be, between 0, which is in a continuation of the existing building's condition here, all the way up to 20 feet. This is the back of the Whitney Fine Arts Center for MCTC campus. It is a long blank wall with no windows or openings on it. We are recommending approval of that variance as well. They have also site plan review and then a plat to plat all of this as to one property. Given the historic property on the site, we needed to plat it into one property. For site plan review, we are recommending approval of that application. They did have 3 areas of alternative compliance. One was the blank wall facing that Whitney Fine Arts Center. The ground floor of the building is over 25 feet in length and blank. It faces a blank wall that is over 25 feet in length and blank as well, and it is just that first story of the building. Another one then is the materials. They do have more fiber cement than what is allowed. It is on that elevation that's in back of the H. Alden Smith house, so it won't be the most visible of the elevations because of the existing landmark that will sit in front of it. And the other item that they needed alternative compliance from was for the number of trees. They are planting 11 canopy trees in the right-of-way. And so as to not block the historic landmark, they are proposing 4 birch trees on the site. They would need a total of 5, so they're missing 1 canopy tree on site. They are doing low-level landscaping and whatnot, just not shown on this plan. But so they don't block this, and then to not interfere with the growth of the trees that they're planting in the boulevard, they're not proposing a 5th canopy tree on the site, and so we are recommending approval of that area of alternative compliance as well. And there are standard conditions of approval on the site plan review, things that we need to check, final lighting plan and screening mechanical equipment. I believe it is screened, but we just want to ensure that it will be when it comes in. So I will stand for any questions.
Okay, and commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first and let us know if there's anything you'd like to add to the staff presentation. Please state your name and address.
My name is Brian Woolsey. I live at 1316 Tyrrell Trail. I'm part of W plus Nordic, the developer. I'm joined by LHB, the architect, and Megan Elliott of Preservation Design Works, our historic consultant. I'm available for questions. I don't have anything to add to the report.
Right, and are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Kranz.
Hi, how will the apartment building be managed? Will there be on-staff management?
That's our plan. Is that there would be on-site property management.
So with the guest parking, couldn't that on-site management assist owners in getting a guest into the parking structure on a rare occasion?
I'll ask LHB to come up and help to answer this question.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kim Breath, I'm LHB architect. There would be a way of electronically opening and controlling the overhead doors by management. It's customarily that you don't mix the visitor parking and resident parking, though the staff report indicates the number of parking stalls we're exceeding, and then we're doing a net add off-site or on the street that equates to the +2 on the street. So it was a compromise.
Can you say that again?
So on this, we are, if you take the existing parking that's on the street, we're creating the street, both Yale and Spruce Place are MSA streets. We're narrowing them both to the minimum widths that are allowed, and then we're adding 4. Currently, Spruce Place has no parking on it. We're adding 4 there. On Yale, currently it didn't indicate any, but we're working with staff from Public Works to see if we can maintain 2 stalls along Yale. So we're trying to add more on Yale.
Any further questions of the applicant? Hearing none, we can see, I know there are some other people who would like to speak on this item, so you can decide who goes first. I guess we can start over on this side of the room if there's anyone over here who would like to speak. Yes, and please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Gwen Rosen. I live at 1235 Yale Place. Is this going to be rental or ownership?
Please ask the questions of us.
Okay, rental or ownership?
I can clarify with staff, but I believe it is a rental.
And the number of stories is now 6 they're asking for. What was it? Wasn't it 4?
It is my understanding in a previous proposal that never came before this commissioner, maybe it did come before committee of the whole, but didn't come for a formal approval. I believe there was a version that was 7 stories, so it was taller than this.
And are there 87 units going in there?
Yes, that's correct.
I live in that neighborhood. I walk in that neighborhood. The traffic in that neighborhood is horrendous now. If you change it and make the streets narrower and put in more parking and have 87 units, that could be another almost 200 people. Loring Park is turning into a toilet with all the dogs. The lake is green because of the dogs, and I love dogs, but there's a lot of people coming into this neighborhood, and I don't think it can handle it. It would be very detrimental to the neighborhood, I think. And the landscape buffer to the sidewalks, to the curb, I'm not sure if that should come up to 0. I'm not an architect, I'm a lawyer, and I don't know that much about planning. This is my first meeting I've ever attended, and that's all I have to say. I don't like the plan.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Anyone else? Yes, and please come to the microphone, state your name. You can decide who goes first. Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Glenn Choquette, 34 Greenway Gables, across the street from the proposed addition. Personally, I would like to see that new mansion saved, or the old mansion renovated. I do urge you to vote against 2 of the variances. As has been previously mentioned, this property is adjacent to a college. We have a lot of traffic, both foot traffic, bicycle traffic, and motor traffic. I've personally been involved in several close calls at the intersection of Harmon and Yale because the sight lines are already bad. And I see this as a potential very dangerous situation if we reduce the variance, if we provide the variance for reduced sight lines even further. The second thing is the parking. We already have very low level of parking available, and with 87 residents there, I don't know where their guests would park. So I urge you to vote against those 2 things, most specifically against the 0 lot line against Yale Place, because that's where the people come out of Harmon, and they already can't see the traffic going back and forth. And if we put a building there, someone I think is going to get hurt, and I'm afraid it's going to be a pedestrian. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next speaker, please state your name and address for the record.
Marcia Sullivan. I'm a resident in the Loring Green area, and my concern is the density of the area itself. And I understand it's a goal of the city to become more dense, but this is an area that is already dense. That building that we talk about, I think it's 22 stories, is the Salvation Army building that houses a lot of senior citizens. Their ambulances come often to that entrance on Yale Place, as well as senior pickup. They take up a fair amount of space in that road as it is. And oftentimes, though there's a stop sign, people have a habit of missing what it means. And there's already 1 lane of traffic instead of 2 because of the necessity of the residents in that building. And also, my concern is that there are a number of high traffic events at Loring Park, which requires parking, requires space for people to walk, and this only makes that a more difficult situation. And I think that increasing it to the density of 87 units, which of course is more than 87 people, will endanger more people. The U-turns are a frequent fact of life on those roads on both sides of that block, and they're not enforced as to whether it's an appropriate activity to be going on there, and it has become a dangerous site, particularly during school time, and students, active students will, and it's a fact of life. And so I urge you to consider that, and if it needs to be approved in any fashion, that it be reduced in scope. Thank you.
All right. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, and please state your name and address for the record.
John Peterson. I live at 12 Greenway Gables, directly across Yale from this development. I'm on the board of directors at Greenway Gables Association too, so my notes are a compilation of my own comments as well as some of our residents. We strongly oppose the setback variances for the setbacks to both Yale and Spruce Place. To the mostly because of the traffic impacts, as people have brought up. There are substantial sightline issues at that intersection right now, which are mostly caused by the proximity of Loring Park Apartments, which are on the east side of that intersection. They are all the way up to the property line, so people already can't see at that intersection. What happens is people who are going south on Spruce Place have to go into the intersection in order to see around that building. It's a fact of life for those of us who live at Greenway Gables that during the rush hours, both morning and evening, we hear a lot of cars honking at each other because it's unsafe. It's unsafe for cars, it's unsafe for pedestrians, it's unsafe for bikes. We don't want to see a three-way stop sign there. I don't think that's going to solve it. There's a substantial amount of traffic that goes through there for the people who are going around the east side of the park. So we strongly oppose both those setback variances. I would like to see the Yale Place setback maintained so it lines up with the MCTC building adjacent to it, which is 11 feet. It's not 0, it's not 15, it's 11, so that would be a variance in itself if it were granted a 4-foot variance. Along Spruce Place, the mansion itself is 22 to 33 feet from the property line. So when you're putting a building and its balconies or whatever up to 0 feet, it's going to cause a situation where this mansion where we're trying to highlight is going to be hiding behind this new building. So by granting that exception on Spruce Place, not only are we causing a traffic issue on that intersection, you're hiding the building you're trying to save. So a lot of concerns about the massing of that. So I'm going to read some of my notes because some of them are from other residents as well. We also oppose the 2 garage entrances on Yale Place. I don't think that's been brought up, but it was noted in city staff that the 2 garage entrances, which are basically next to each other, one comes out of the alley that they're putting, and the other one is facing Yale Place. The total curb cut is about 40 feet, which exceeds city standards, which is 25 and no more to exceed 35. So they didn't even ask for that variance, but you have 2 garage doors, both supporting two-way traffic coming onto Yale Place, directly across the entrance and exit from both Booth Manor and Greenway Gables. They're in close proximity to the intersection with Spruce and Yale. It's a bad traffic situation. Here you're going to make it worse, and you could have 2 cars coming out at the same time. You could have 2 cars going out. There's no safe place between the 2 garage doors for pedestrians. The Greenway Gables residents have opposed the garages on that side of the building from the get-go. We haven't had a chance to comment on this publicly since it was last brought to us in March, and nothing has changed since that point. We do oppose the building height, although I know in terms of density, the city is encouraging stronger heights. I would like to point out, though, that the Minneapolis 2040 plan, the revised draft, has this slated as a 4-story lot. So you're going against your new planning documents from the get-go if you're going to approve a variance. The loss of on-street parking has been brought up. There are 3 meter spots on Yale currently. So I think they said there's a plus, but there's only a +1 as they have it shown right now. But yes, you're adding potentially 200 residents to the neighborhood, so it's a net loss of parking. And then the lack of green space on Yale Place. Really with that setback to 0, with the garage entrances, there's no green space left on that end of the building. It's garages, it's a balcony, there's nothing left. If you look at their documents that they provided, they say that they meet the greening requirements, but they're all around the mansion. Around this new building, there's really nothing besides some boulevard trees, but they're narrowing the street to fit the trees in. So does this building fit the site? Not as proposed. You're narrowing the street, you're maximizing up to the intersection, all to fit a building in to save a mansion. So those are my comments.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Anyone else?
Can I ask one more question?
No, we need to just let people speak once. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, several applications before us, a total of 7. Are there any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? Commissioner Kogan.
Question, I think it's for staff regarding these concerns about sightlines and traffic, are there any proposed pedestrian improvements around the site at all that you're aware of upcoming?
I know that there are concerns that have been raised to Public Works from the neighborhood, and they are involved in, or they are working with the neighborhood on some issues. What those are specifically, I don't know. I don't know if anyone from CLPC is here, but I know that they are aware of this interaction that's going on between the neighborhood and Public Works.
Thank you.
Any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with the motion? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve staff recommendation for the conditional use permit with the one stated condition.
Right, we have a motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit for building height with the one stated condition. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Sweezy.
Thank you. I just want to say something to the neighbors and the people who have come out to speak, and it's something I've said before with projects in other neighborhoods that, I hear what you're saying about the traffic and the height and all of that, but I think what's important to know, and it probably wouldn't make any difference to me if I was sitting where you are, but once again, this is happening in pretty much every desirable neighborhood in the city. And we hear from neighborhoods about height and traffic and all of these things, and it's Marcy Homes and Prospect Park and Lake Harriet and Uptown and every other neighborhood. And so I think this will pass. And so I just wanted to let you know that we have heard you, but tonight it happens to be your neighborhood, but this is a thing that's happening, and tonight it's your neighborhood, and you've come out to voice your complaints or your concerns at least about it, and at least for me as a member of this commissioner to vote no based on those things would be inconsistent with the ones that are happening in the other neighborhoods in the city. And so we do hear a lot that everybody seems to understand the goals about the density and things like that, and I understand that you don't want this project necessarily in your neighborhood, but I just wanted to say that tonight it's this neighborhood, but any other night it's a different neighborhood, and we're having the same discussions.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Rockwell.
And just to build off what Commissioner Sweezy was saying, I think these are often difficult decisions, but there are strong public policy goals that we have in our current comprehensive plan and other associated plans, and in our 2040 plan, which is in process of being finished and ultimately approved in some form or another. And these are goals around sustainability and around equity and around access, walkable access to transit and amenities and whatever opportunities we are trying to provide people in the city. And so these are all overlapping ideas and issues, and there is no perfect solution. There's no perfect building that fits everybody's needs. And so I just want to articulate, yes, this is happening in this neighborhood tonight, but also there are strong rationales. I've been reading the IPCC climate report over the last week, and that has strong language around creating transit-reliant, dense communities. And I think this is something that we need to do.
Right. Any further discussion? Commissioner Kronzer.
Yeah, just two notes. Staff noted it, but there are buildings in the area that range in height between 2 and 22 stories. I'd also like to mention this project is a means to save a historic resource in the city. No one needs to rehash the history of Minneapolis and tearing down beautiful buildings. This is a beautiful mansion that's going to be saved because of this project. I think we should recognize that this is, in many ways, a 6-story building at a busy intersection, but it's also saving a historic resource within the city.
Right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item A, the conditional use permit. Clerk, please call a roll.
Colville.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Cronzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Sweezy,
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer, would you like to?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion against staff recommendation to deny the variance to reduce the guest parking from 2 to 0 and require 2 parking stalls on site.
Right, we have a motion to deny variance B. That would require guest parking stalls. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Kranzer?
I'm having a hard time finding the practical difficulty with other projects in town that do manage guest parking through controlled access, and I think that's possible to do in this project as well.
All right, any further discussion? And just checking in with the applicant, I see they're nodding that. Further, if we can give you an opportunity to respond if there's anything, but we can see if there's any further discussion on that. If there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to deny variance B for guest parking. Clerk, please call a roll.
Coghill,
Aye.
Ellison, Cronzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Sweezy,
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. And Commissioner Kranz?
Yeah, I'll try to see if it flies. I'd like to make a motion to approve the 3 variances, items C, D, and E. Item C with each one of them with 1 stated condition.
Right, and we have a motion to approve items C, D, and E, the setback variances, each with 1 stated condition. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? Commissioner Coghill.
I'll just say, I think that some of this gets to the concern about sight lines and intersections. I'm not entirely convinced that greater setbacks are the solution to pedestrian and bicycle safety. I think that there are certainly issues that the city and the neighborhood are working on, it seems, to improve safety for all vehicle and pedestrian uses in the area. And it's my hope that as this area gets more dense, it puts more onus on the public to come up with those solutions.
All right, any further discussion? And I would just add on those setback variances, the OR district does envision a little bit of a yard, and we're still getting that in some cases just with the location of the property line. And it does appear one of the graphics showed the site triangle at the intersection, and it appears that it's adequate for that. I'll mention, though, that there is B4N zoning adjacent to this site, which envisions a continuous street edge, and that's what we have across the street from here and other properties in the neighborhood. And when we look at the findings we need to be made, that it's in keeping with the spirit of the plan, also that it's not going to be detrimental to the enjoyment of adjacent property. When adjacent properties have that condition, I think it's fair that this one does as well. So if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second to approve items C, D, and E. Clerk, please call a roll.
Coghill,
Aye.
Ellison, Cronzer,
Aye.
Magrino,
Aye.
Rockwell,
Aye.
Sweezy, 6-0.
That motion carries. Commissioner Kranzer?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the site plan with the 5 stated conditions.
We have a motion to approve item F, the site plan with 5 stated conditions. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing Commissioner Magrino.
I'll just make a few general comments about the building. I also live in Loring Park. I'll be able to see the site from my balcony. A lot of the road conditions in Loring Park are kind of bad. I think a lot of the streets in that neighborhood over the past 50, 60 years have been engineered to move traffic as fast as possible from downtown Minneapolis to the freeways. And so a lot of the time, cars are going 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, and narrowing those streets and making it so people actually do have to slow down and pay attention to what they're doing as they're crossing the street or as they're turning, I think does clearly make it a lot safer for pedestrians and other folks who are using those roads. And in general, I think that this is a well-designed project. As Commissioner Kronzer pointed out, does a great job of preserving a historic building that's on the corner, adds some needed housing to the neighborhood, and I'm looking forward to seeing it get built.
All right, thank you. And is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve item F. Clerk, please call the roll.
Colgill.
Aye.
Ellison. Aye. Kronzer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. Finally, item G, Commissioner Kronzer.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the preliminary plat.
And we have a motion to approve item G, the preliminary plat. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Colgill.
Aye.
Ellison. Aye. Kronzer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
And that motion carries. That concludes our discussion on item 9. Our final discussion for tonight is item 11, 1101 West River Parkway South, Mr. Crandall. And Commissioner Rockwell, I know you had a question about this related to the building facade facing the walkway along the south edge of the property. Is there anything in particular you'd like Mr. Crandall to focus on?
Yeah, I just wanted to understand a little bit. I'll start by saying I think this project is in generally very good shape, and since our committee of the whole, one of the sets of points suggested here towards the PUD is 3 points for the pedestrian improvements, which largely sits on the, I guess it's the east-west pedestrian pathway that runs kind of through the middle of the block. That would be a connector between, I think, the sort of bike path through the block past behind the what are now parking lots and the Red Cross building and so forth, to create a throughway. And so, it's, if that is, and I know that staff have been working with the applicant on making sure that that's curb separated and kind of adheres to some or safety standards for what we would consider public rights of way. I think if we're giving points for that, which are for exceptional accessible pedestrian and or bicycle access through the site, I noted that we have a policy facing public streets that are that we have active uses on 70% of parking garages, and the applicant's done a fabulous job on the river-facing frontage, but not on the back-facing frontage, because there are, in fact, no windows facing back. And I know it's a complicated and tight site, but I was a little bit uncomfortable with this being an exceptional pedestrian throughway without any active uses and meeting that definition. And I think there are other ways that could be fleshed out, maybe with more greening, or one of the reasons that we are encouraging pedestrianism is sustainability. It could be other ways to meet some of that intent, because when it comes for alternative compliance, we grant alternative compliance if the alternative meets the intent of the chapter. And the site plan includes amenities that meet that, and I'm just not sure what the alternative is here. So,
Right. Mr. Crandall.
I'm happy to address that question specifically. I know it seems like we have a lot of folks here for this project, so it might be helpful to just provide the context a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's fair to have a brief presentation.
Okay. And then I'll get to that specifically, Commissioner Rockwell. So the project before you is at 1101 West River Parkway. The site is currently zoned I-1 and also has the downtown parking overlay, the downtown height overlay, and the industrial living overlay. The applicant is seeking a conditional use permit for a planned unit development for a 124 dwelling unit building, functionally a 41-story building, technically a 48-story building with how the zoning code defines a story, and which also includes a proposed 12,300 square feet of commercial space. The applicant's also seeking a variance to reduce the rear yard from 99 feet to 40 feet for that requirement. That's along the south property line. A variance to increase the maximum height of a fence along the east and north property line from 8 to 10 feet. Site plan review and preliminary and final plat. I know that the applicant team is here and they can probably answer specific questions also, so I won't go through a lot of detail with the design, other than to say that the current site is occupied by a 4-story office building and surface parking lot. The applicant is proposing to develop a surface parking lot with the new proposal and to replat the land. The new plat would create access to the new structure via 11th Avenue. So there'd be a driveway accessing all of the parking on site off of 11th. And then as a part of the plan unit development application, the applicant is proposing a number of amenities, one of which is a pedestrian plaza along West River Parkway in between the new proposed tower and the existing office building. And you can see that it's the darkest area here in the site plan, as well as the walkway that Commissioner Rockwell mentioned, which is along the south property line connecting between 11th Avenue South and the property immediately adjacent to the east. The hope and plan, I believe, is that connection would become a full connection between the Dinkytown Greenway and Gold Medal Park, and potentially would integrate pedestrian access between a lot of the residential parcels on the site. One of the recommended conditions of approval from staff was to move the proposed pedestrian pathway that was originally proposed through the surface parking lot to the other side of the surface parking stalls, so that there wasn't conflict between those parking spaces and pedestrian access to the plaza along the West River Parkway. I provided a memo that has a revised site plan and landscaping plan for you that shows the applicant's proposal in that regard. As far as the active uses go, the way that the ordinance is written with regard to active uses is that for parking garages, applicants are expected to meet that standard for elevations that face a public right-of-way. And in this proposal, that only includes West River Parkway. The applicant's not proposing to establish new public right-of-way along the south property line, but the intent and the way that the standard is written for pedestrian enhancements in the planned unit development is that it is enhanced and exceptional pedestrian access through and around the site, both on private property and on the public right-of-way. So staff felt that that condition was met and that it is not specifically tied to its adjacency to active uses in this case. The applicant has worked to implement active uses along that West River Parkway after receiving feedback from this commission and from staff that that would be the only acceptable outcome for a proposal of this size. There are some details provided in the application for the fence variance. This is a fence along West River Parkway and along the east property line, enclosing the proposed vehicle court. And then there's a diagram sort of displaying the different amenity proposals that the applicant is proposing as a part of the planned unit development. The exceptions that they're seeking to the zoning code through the PUD are for building height. So in the I-1, there's a 4-story height limit. In the downtown height overlay, that increases to 6. They're seeking an exception to go to 48 via the zoning code definition of stories. And then I should have just addressed the rear yard variance. That requirement comes from the underlying industrial zoning and is really intended as a safeguard against harmful or noxious industrial uses adjacent to residential uses. The planning department underwent a zoning reform recently where we eliminated that requirement from commercial districts with the intention of enabling residential development that was less encumbered by those large yard variances, with the assumption that those uses are not as harmful to adjacencies. So I hope that addresses some of your question, Commissioner Rockwell, and I'll conclude my presentation there, and I can answer specific questions, but also I know the applicant is here to speak as well.
All right, and commissioners, are there any questions of staff? Hearing none, I will open the public hearing on this item. I'd like to ask the applicant to speak first and see if there's anything you'd like to add to the staff presentation. Please state your name and address.
Yeah, Planning Commissioners, Carl Runk, real estate developer at Ryan Companies. Address is 533 3rd Street South, Minneapolis. I'm joined tonight by a co-developer, Luigi Bernardi, as well as the design architect from this project, Paul Whalen, from Robert Ames Stern Architects. We're happy to answer your questions in more detail here tonight. But we have incorporated, we feel, the comments that were made from committee of the whole very well in terms of, as you mentioned, the active use requirement along West River Parkway as well as in front of the motor court. And the new pedestrian pathway going east and west doesn't exist today on the site, and this definitely creates it's a 600-foot long proposed pedestrian pathway that could connect to the Diggytown Greenway, as well as a north-south connection. And since committee of the whole, we have also eliminated surface stalls that were part of that staff report at that point. There were, I believe, 6 or 7 surface stalls on the south side of the tower that have now been eliminated.
Questions of the applicant? Commissioner Rockwell.
Is that along that path, between the building and the path, that's just a throughway to connect through the front of the building, is that right?
That's correct. Okay. If it's shown the north-south pathway you're suggesting or referring to?
No, I'm just saying you come in off 11th and then you can both walk and drive your car all the way until you're kind of dead end.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, so you can, right, and then you can, if you're in a car, take a left, and then you're kind of at the front entrance of the building.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And we do believe long term this could be, given this block is, as you know, oddly shaped. It's almost 11 acres, 4 blocks almost together. That we believe, if the future Red Cross owner, whoever that may be, this could connect all the way to 13th and create an inner street that really wanted to be there in the first place.
Right. And sorry, and right now, just to clarify, the path, the 600-foot long pedestrian path, it currently begins at 11th, but dead ends at the Red Cross site because we don't have,
Correct.
Obviously, site control.
Correct. It does dead end at this time in our proposed design on our property line.
Right. Thanks.
Right. Commissioner Kronzer.
Staying right there, how do you imagine the management of that pedestrian walkway?
In terms of snow removal and maintenance?
And just access to general populace. I mean, it's designed to be a long-term public connection, but right now it's a private sidewalk. I mean, can you just talk about how you see that being used?
We are proposing that the homeowners association maintain and secure and light that pedestrian pathway and driveway along with the motor court and the landscaping. So we do propose it being entirely privately maintained by the homeowners association, given that it's private property, but available to the public. There won't be gates or anything, precluding someone from walking through there.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we can move on to some other speakers. And just so I have a sense, how many of you would like to speak on this item? Just a couple? All right, you can decide who goes first and come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Forgive me, this is the first time I've spoken here before, so apologies for any protocol breaches I make. My name is Jim Miller, and I now live at 1240 South 2nd Street, Minneapolis, which is the property, the Legacy, which would be south of the 11 building. My main concern coming today was on the Part B variance, the drop from 99 to 40 feet, which, as I understand now, it was mainly for industrial purposes. But there are concerns as a resident of the new legacy building about the burden and closeness to our new building as well, too. That's the main concern we have, especially with the 48-story portion being directly in front of our new building we have here. Again, I come as a private resident. I don't represent the building. It's a brand new building. I'd say less than 10% of us have moved in, and the majority are not aware of this setback and how close it will be. So I would ask that either denial of that variance or time for further discussion among further residents as they come in, as they're being made aware. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak? Next speaker. And yes, and please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Tim Biltzo. My address is 730 North 4th Street in Minneapolis. And I'm here to speak in favor of the application and staff's recommendation for approval. I'm a resident of downtown Minneapolis, moved here 3 years ago from the suburbs, and am really enjoying the density and the diversity and all the great things that downtown living in downtown environment is. And I think this project, it will be iconic, and it'll add more diversity in terms of bringing more folks down here. And I support it, and I speak for myself, not other neighbors, but I think it's worth your consideration and support, and thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we have several applications before us, starting with the conditional use permit for a planned unit development. We have a total of 5 applications. Commissioner Rockwell.
I just wanted to clarify my initial concern, and I just opened it up to hear what other commissioners think about it, and we can kind of work as a group. My concern, I'm aware that this is not technically a public right-of-way at the back here, and I'm not indicating that it is, but I think the intent is that it's publicly accessible. When we think about what makes an exceptional pedestrian realm, we have sort of decided as a city through our codes that do apply to public rights-of-way that not being along sort of car-focused or blank walls is important. We just denied variance in a conditional use permit for an expansion of parking lot downtown earlier tonight. And so I'm not trying to say that the alternative compliance code language applies here in fact, but rather in principle, that a right-of-way should have active uses in a context like this. And I also think that this is an important project and a good project, and should go forward in some form. And I thank the applicant for making changes since committee of the whole. But I do continue to have some concerns, and I think part of that is based on the proximity to vehicles and the number of parking stalls. Again, we've talked about this in a lot of contexts, and this is one way that manifests itself, and that we've tried to control that through our code. And if we're giving points for, quote, exceptional pedestrian facilities, I just wonder what we could do to make this exceptional. And maybe I don't have anybody that thinks this isn't exceptional, in which case, let's move on.
All right.
That's kind of an open-ended, what do my fellow commissioners think?
Okay, any further questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Cogill.
I would generally agree with Commissioner Rockwell's comments here. I think it's fantastic what the improvements that we've seen on this project overall, but if the vision along that pedestrian space is for people to actually walk there, it would be great for us to move in a direction of showing exceptional active uses along that not really right of way, but effectively right of way.
Commissioner Magrino.
I also sort of agree in principle. I would just say that with the existing building that's already on the other side of this block, the Legacy, there kind of already is a pretty significant blank wall condition. So I certainly wouldn't hurt to improve this other building that's being built, but I think it's already going to be an issue, and I don't know that we're going to significantly improve the condition back there.
I would tend to agree. I think, as the applicant, I think, alluded to in retrospect, maybe when this area was developed not all that many years ago, I think less than 20 years ago, we didn't really have a vision for an urban environment here and ended up with a very, very large block. So I think in retrospect, if we had a different vision for the area originally, the conditions might have been different. I do think that, a building does often need a backside just as the Legacy does. And while I think that having a connection that's publicly accessible through here in the long term is very important, and I'm glad to see that was incorporated in the project. I'm not sure that changes to that south facade are going to drastically change that environment. Commissioner Rockwell.
I'm wondering if the applicant could come and discuss. This doesn't have to be a massive set of changes, but through additional landscaping or lighting, or a building does need to have a backside, but as discussed earlier by the applicant, this is an 11-acre block, and we're sort of trying to break this block up to make it more urban scale. And if we're trying to break the block up to make it more urban scale, then we're saying this side of the building is kind of also a front to that interior pathway. And I am, as our testifier earlier tonight said, not a planner. I'm a lawyer. So I don't really have a good idea on this one, but I just wonder if the applicant has anything that they could conceive of to make this more, the existence of the path and the curb is good, but again, it feels like if this is a backside, but if we're giving PUD points for this, and the basis of that is that it's exceptional, I think we could think creatively, or maybe we could give direction to work with staff on a lighting and greening plan that brings us up more. My preference would be active uses, but that I don't think is possible.
We can ask the applicant to come up and address that. So Commissioner Rockwell, to clarify, you're not necessarily thinking it would have to involve changes to the floor plan. You're thinking through some combination of lighting, landscaping, additional windows.
My preference as a human being is that we would have active uses. My knowledge as like a pragmatic person looking at these drawings is that seems highly unlikely that we could do that without torpedoing what is a good project. And so I'd like to hear what the full vision here is. And frankly, I'm using this not just to tell this applicant, but to tell other applicants coming down the pike, looking at this very carefully, because if we're going to give points for something like this, it actually has to be exceptional.
I'm happy to let the applicant address that. I just wanted to point out also that the applicant is proposing a significant amount of enhanced exterior pedestrian scaled lighting, which I think addresses both of those issues in terms of the enhanced lighting standard, but also the pedestrian standard. And I didn't include the specifications for the actual fixtures in your packet, but you can look at the plan. And I will say that in my experience, it's one of the nicer exterior lighting plans that we've seen, and definitely helps staff get to meeting that standard. But I'll let the applicant speak to that too.
Hi, my name is Paul Whalen, and I'm a partner at Robert Stern Architects in New York. I don't know if you need my home address. I live in New York City. So with respect to the east-west walkway. We're providing a series of low-scale fixtures that would be maybe 12 feet high, 10 feet high, so that they're definitely pedestrian scale, not car scale, to light that passageway. And we're providing a row of trees all the way down there to sort of create a kind of a space above the walkway and a green hedge. And then along the south side of the building, we're providing another landscape strip. And we're creating a base to the building to create, so the building doesn't just come down, but we have a string course and a base, and we have a series of recessed panels along the bottom of the building that will bring a pedestrian scale, and they will be uplighted from below so that they'll glow. But the fixtures themselves are going to be on the opposite side of the street. We thought it would be too much to have fixtures on both sides of the street, but the bottom of the building will glow. And then above that, there are additional recessed elements. There are a lot of industrial buildings actually that have sort of recessed panels that break down the scale of the facade. That's the sort of technique that we're using on the south side of the building. So we're definitely not just leaving it as a blank wall. We're treating it as a piece of architecture. And then the north-south passage, which has now been moved so that it is next to the current office building, and so therefore we had it behind the parking before. Now it's in front of the parking, so that there isn't a disruption between cars backing up and somebody on a bicycle or a pedestrian walking in that north-south path. I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's what we're thinking. And also, the one other thing is that the paving. The driveway paving is going to be colored concrete pavers. So it's not blacktop, not a big, huge poured piece of concrete, but it'll have a nice scale to it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And commissioners, are there any further questions, or would someone like to start things off with a motion? 5 applications before us. Commissioner Cogill.
I'll move to approve the conditional use permit to allow a new mixed use plan unit development with the 2 stated conditions.
We have a motion to approve item A, the conditional use permit for the planned unit development with the 2 stated conditions. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call a roll.
Cogill?
Aye.
Ellison? Aye. Cronzer?
Aye.
Negrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. Moving along. Commissioner Cogill.
I will move both items B and C, the variances to decrease the minimum rear yard requirement and increase the maximum height of a fence.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve items B and C, the variances for rear yard setback and height of fence. Is there any discussion? And since one of the speakers did touch on that issue, I will say, as Mr. Crandall stated, that 99-foot setback would relate to the underlying industrial zoning here, and that would be pretty impractical to require such a deep setback at a very urban location like this, and would make the property, even though it is a somewhat larger property, it would make it somewhat difficult to develop as well. And I don't know just having a parking lot or a lawn there wouldn't add a lot. So just want to mention that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve items B and C. Clerk, please call a roll.
Cogill?
Aye.
Ellison? Aye. Cronzer?
Aye.
Negrino?
Aye.
Rockwell?
Aye.
Sweezy?
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. Commissioner Cogill.
I will move approval of the site plan review for a new 41-story mixed-use building with the 1, 2, 3 stated conditions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item D, the site plan review with the 3 stated conditions. Is there any discussion?
I'll just
Commissioner Cogill.
say that really appreciative of what this final look is here, and hopeful that the vision for pedestrian connections and maybe that 13th Street can happen, and that this project kind of sets that in motion, and a larger vision for the future of the downtown area. So thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the site plan review. Clerk, please call the roll.
Colville.
Aye.
Ellison. Aye. Franzer.
Aye.
Magrino.
Aye.
Rockwell.
Aye.
Sweezy.
Aye.
6-0.
That motion carries. And Commissioner Cogill, we have item E. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve item E, the preliminary and final plat. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll. That concludes our discussion on item 11, also concludes our business for today. We have committee of the whole this Thursday. Our next meeting is October 29th, and we are adjourned.